People that go to Africa, white people, they always have this, this group of kids who run after them, kind of rude, give me my money, and that's just because white people are just so responsive, they think, oh my gosh, you poor kids, and you look so, dirty, and you look so tattered. So we're just going to give you something. So, they have adapted to this. They are actually raised by, their standards in the family are actually they're raised very respectful to the elders. So they would come to me and they would not even ask for anything, and I had so much, right? I had like sweets, and I had, colored pencil to draw with, but they would always say, Madame, what can we help you with? And so they would either go get water. My closest water source was 1 kilometer away. So they either would do this, or they would do my pile of dishes, or they would just wash my floor in the house. And then when they were done, they were saying, okay, can we get something? And I would say, okay, I have this, and this. What do you want? And then they would choose something. Usually they would draw.
Does that happen in St. George?
Not really. And I'm a teacher, that never happens anywhere.
Welcome to The Art Box, your podcast dedicated to exploring the vibrant art scene in Nevada and beyond. Join us as we embark on a journey through galleries, theaters, studios, public lands, and streetscapes, meeting the artists, curators, archaeologists, nature lovers, and cultural influencers who shape our creative community and our world. Whether you're looking for your next cultural adventure, seeking inspiration for your own artistic pursuits, or simply curious about the world of art, tune into The Art Box. Together, let's open up a world of creativity and imagination. Let's dive in.
This must be really awesome for you guys to do this and talk with so many people.
It's a lot of fun. Steve, I meet the best people on hikes. I met Birgit McMullen.
Oh, you guys went on a hike. Where were you?
In Black Ridge.
Yes.
Around Black Ridge.
Up in Utah? Yeah, because I met Birgit.
Yeah, there you go.
Found out that Birgit is an artist from Germany, right?
Yep.
So
I grew up in Germany, yeah.
All right, so want to tell us a little bit about your art here? We're at the Art Provides, which is in the Dixie Watercolor Gallery 35 building. And you have a special display here. Want to tell us first about that and what it is and how it got here?
It's actually an interesting story because I painted these 70 watercolor paintings in Malawi, and they are of Malawians and of the country, and I painted them on site, I think 93% of them. And I had never the idea that I would exhibit them anywhere, but it just happened. And I showed them at this year's gallery at some point, all of them together, and one of the managers there saw this show, or she hung it up, and she said, we have to invite you to the Watercolor Society. And so they did, and so I gave a presentation at the St. George Watercolor Society, and one of the attendants was the gallery owner for Main 35. No, 55, 35.
Gallery 35.
Yeah. Well, actually, it was the owner from upstairs, so Art Provides.
Art Provides, okay.
And so she introduced herself to me and said, I'm having the show come up, and it's titled Her Story, and it's about female stories, and your work would be wonderful in this gallery. And so we exchanged contact information, and I'm really glad that she invited me because I met a bunch of really nice and wonderful artists there.
What in the world were you doing in Africa? Or was it a short tourist trip?
It started out as a short tourist trip. I mean, since I was 12 years old, growing up in East Germany, I wanted to go to Africa. I read a book about Albert Schweitzer and...
Addie here. Albert Schweitzer was a renowned theologian, philosopher, and physician who established a hospital in Lambarene, Gabon, in West Africa. He dedicated much of his life to providing medical care and promoting humanitarian work in Africa, emphasizing the concept of reverence for life as a guiding principle for his efforts.
And ever since, I have this idea in my head that I have to go to Africa. Well, I was 48 when I talked to a friend in Kanab, and she had been going to Malawi with an NGO from Canada. And this one year, 2016, she said she would go in June, which, me being a teacher, I have June off. And I said, oh, can I just go? And I had like no idea where Malawi is. I didn't even know it was in Africa. So, I mean, I started out very ignorant, like most people probably. And we figured it out, and I was invited, and I could go. And it was really scary for me to go there because, you know, everybody, you have to go through all the health counseling and, you know, and everybody makes it really scary to go to an African country, you know, with all the diseases that are there and the water that you cannot drink and all. And I didn't know what to pack. I didn't know what kind of clothes they're wearing. I don't know where they live, in straw huts or, you know, I mean, I had like really no clue. And when I got there, we lived in a village with this NGO, and I was absolutely smitten. I mean, I forgot to eat. Actually, I wasn't hungry at all the entire time. I mean, time, as we know it, doesn't really exist there. You know, everything just comes as it comes, and you kind of move along. And every day was an adventure of a new kind because everything is done differently there than it's done here. And after my 5 weeks in this village, I didn't want to go back. I mean, I didn't want to come back home. I mean, I had 2 children in school and a job. But I, of course, you know, had to go home. And then that was the hardest thing, coming home back to America, because I could not, they call it re-entry shock. So it took me a couple of days to get used to Africa, African life. And when I came back to Cedar City in Utah, I could not get used to it. I mean, one day passed, another day passed. I started wearing African dress. Every time I went to in a restaurant, I would think, oh my gosh, that price that would pay for a student to attend college for 4 years. And I bought a dress, and I thought, oh, I cannot buy this dress because this would probably nourish a whole family for 6 months. And so I would just make those comparisons in my head, and I just couldn't relax anymore. And so I applied for Peace Corps. So it didn't come out of the blue, because the years before I already had kind of like searched what could I do. So, and before my visit in Africa, I had decided I'm just going to wait till retirement. That would be the, you know, sensible thing to do. But after this trip to Malawi, I said I have to do it now. So first, because my impression was so fresh. Second, there were so many things happening there that I just couldn't explain in my white Westerner mind, that I kind of just wanted to get to the bottom of. And also I saw how hard that life would be in Malawi, the 5th poorest country in this world, like physically hard, you know, carrying water. I mean, the whole ordeal, taking public buses in the heat and all. And I thought, if I wait till retirement, I just might not have the strength. So I applied, not telling my job, my boss, anything. And after 2 weeks, they had already contacted him, and I was horrified because I wanted to tell him first. At this time, I was the art teacher at a charter school in Cedar City. When he found out, it was Friday, and he called me in on Monday. And he said, well, it doesn't really surprise me that you would do such a thing, but I'm also glad that I had all weekend to think about. And so we would like to keep this job for you for however long you want to stay in Africa and you know, be of service. And I was like, well, I don't know what's going to happen, because you go to Africa and your whole life changes, so I don't know. But I mean, this is what he offered, you know. And then all the preparation started with Peace Corps, which was quite an extensive application and education process.
Did your children go with you, or did they stay?
No, my children didn't stay. So that was another thing. I mean, you have to, you have all those belongings that you have, and you have your children, and you have the dogs, and you have a mortgage and all these things, and you have to kind of put that on hold or sell the house or something. So my son at the time was already married. He had married early, and his plan was to go to Germany. And my daughter was a freshman in college. And so she needed a break from her mama. And I think it was safe for her to stay in the house without me in it. So she stayed there and rented the house with a couple of friends. And my ex-husband was so nice to come back to the house and, was the oversight over everything. Throughout this whole year of preparation, I had many times where I thought I just couldn't pull it off. It wouldn't be possible. But in the end, it all worked out. I mean, it was stressful, but once I left, everything just falls behind you and you're in this new life.
So you had a year to prepare? Mm-hmm. Then how long did you go?
What do you mean?
How long did you, when you went?
Oh,
how long did you stay?
when you're with Peace Corps, you have to commit to 27 months.
Okay.
So that's like 2.5 years. I mean, 2.25 years, I think. So it's like 3 months of extensive training in a local village, and they put a lot of emphasis on language and culture and how to even survive in a foreign culture, because you're not in a big group and you don't really have supervision or somebody like with you constantly. I mean, you're alone in a village, and the better you speak the language, the better off you are. And that is really where the painting came into play. After 3 months of language training, young people probably have a pretty good handle on a language. The older you get, it's harder to do. I was 49 when I left, and it was really hard. It was a struggle. And Peace Corps, as I said, is very strict on language education, so you had to pass a test, and if you didn't pass it, you had to stay back and do one-on-one training, or they wouldn't, place you in your village. And I really, really wanted to stay. So I worked really hard, and then, one day we were graduated from this very stressful time, and we packed our mattress and our 2 suitcases and a stove, like a little wooden stove, into a big car, and they drove us to the village and dropped us off by the side of the road. And that was it. From then on out, we were on our own.
Wow, there were 2 of you? How many were there that were dropped off at the village?
Well, just, if you would go as a married couple, that would be the 2 of you. Mm-hmm. But we only had 2 or 3 of those. But the rest of us, it was just 1 of us in a village.
Oh, so you were alone in a village.
Yes.
Did you take someone's place?
No, at this place I was the first.
You were the first.
Yeah, but what I wanted, since I was on vacation the year before, as I said, with this NGO, and they had a placement really close by. So, in fact, the village that I was placed in was called Malosa, in the Domasi district, and the village I was living in before was Togolo village, also in the Domasi district, and it only took like 15 minutes by public transportation to go from one place to another. So I felt I came back to something familiar, and the people welcomed me with open arms because they liked me coming back. Although I had a completely different assignment. I mean, coming as an NGO with pockets full of money and being a Peace Corps volunteer living on their wages, was a very different story.
What was your assignment as a Peace Corps volunteer? Did you teach art or
I thought else? I would be teaching art, but no. So Peace Corps countries apply for Peace Corps services, and they usually have 3 areas, sometimes more, in which they need help. So in one of the areas is education, and so I was an education volunteer with the assignment to teach English. But I must say, as I said, in Africa, everything is different. School is different. For example, my first classroom with ninth graders. So I was in a secondary school. My first classroom with ninth graders had 2 benches in there and 110 students and 5 textbooks. And of course, there's also not enough teachers, or the teachers do not always work for different reasons. So I started out as an English teacher. I tried to put a little bit of art into the education, but it turned out to be very difficult just because there's no supplies. I mean, there were hardly any paper or colored pencils. I mean, I really only had what I had for myself. Later, I found out that you could buy some of the things for European or American prices in, the capital, Lilongwe, but I mean, it's very far away,
So there was no Amazon.
No, well,
There was no being pencils dropped on the front
actually,
door.
you could order things on Amazon, but if the package would ever get there, that is a different story. So I tried different things as a teacher who is passionate about art. For example, I experimented with beads. I would just boil beads until they're like really, really, a rich red, and we would paint with that, which worked actually quite good. But I mean, it's not color fast. I also made glue out of cassava root. So cassava root is a vegetable that is local there, and it's one of their main staple foods, and actually a wonderful root. However, so I was peeling it and cutting it and boiling it and making some really decent sticky glue, and we would try to make mosaics out of legumes, so beans and rice. Of course, this didn't go over very well because in a country that doesn't really have enough to eat, to use food items as art supplies, I think it wasn't a very smart idea. But you just learn all these things, right?
Well, who taught you that? Was it someone locally who taught you? Or did you know about that going in?
No, I didn't know. I didn't know. I guess I found out. I don't remember exactly, but so when you go into a country and you go with Peace Corps, so I don't know any other organizations, but so we were all connected, even though we were like alone in the village. We had WhatsApp, and during our 3 months training together, we were 63 volunteers in the 3 sections. But we were so connected that I could literally stand in my classroom and needed a list of 10 verbs and maybe, had a blackout and I just couldn't remember the words because I also didn't have a textbook. I would just type it in WhatsApp and somebody would see it, and they would send me the answer. And this is how all of our information worked. So I'm guessing, looking back, I probably typed it in some kind of chat and said, okay, does anybody know how to make glue or how to,
So you had Wi-Fi.
So we did have Wi-Fi occasionally. So not everywhere. In this location, I did have Wi-Fi. I lived in a formal storage unit of a larger house. And so I did have Wi-Fi. When I moved to another location, which, that's a whole nother story, but then I didn't have Wi-Fi for a month until the school got computers that another NGO had donated, and they needed Wi-Fi, so they just bribed the data company, so they would move their satellites in a way that they would take, coverage away from a certain part of the village and move it to another part of the village. And so I was then connected, therefore. So it was adventurous because sometimes you had to find a tree for Wi-Fi connection, and I had we worked with Malawians and we called them counterparts. So when we worked on projects together, so one of my counterparts, his name was Frank. He was always concerned about my well-being, and when I said I have no internet connection, I don't know, we need to fill out this application, and I don't know how to even download it. So we would just go on Wi-Fi hunts at night, and we would find places where we could get connection. So sometimes we would go to the library of the local college. They actually do have schools, higher education there. And we would just bribe a student. The library was closed, and we would all stand outside. And some people had Wi-Fi passwords who would be students there, and you had to give them some money, and they would give you the password. So it was always adventurous, Some volunteers never had Wi-Fi the entire time.
Birgit, what compelled you to create art about your experiences in Africa and the life of the people there? And what was the ordinary daily life like in your village?
That's a big question. I'm going to start what compelled me to make art. Well, as I said already, I was an artist, or I am an artist, and I had limited supplies. A friend of mine, a professor, art professor, gave me like a really small watercolor palette and a small watercolor book. And I never had done watercolors before, so I'm originally an oil painter and acrylic, painting large paintings. And so I'm not familiar, or at this time I was not familiar with watercolor nor with a small format. But as I said, Peace Corps would provide language training, and then they would expect you to communicate with your language and make connections and try to integrate into the culture, and you need language for this. And as I also mentioned before, is that I was like a very slow student. It was very difficult for me to really be fluent in that new language. It's, by the way, called Chitonga. So, but I still had this assignment to make connections with the people. So one day I thought, okay, I'm gonna take my little watercolor palette and my little watercolor book, and I'm just gonna sit on the sidelines of a big market, and that's what I'm gonna do. I just sit there and I draw. And it really worked beautifully. Not that I really had a plan. I just thought I have to get out there, but people never seen anybody draw or paint there before. So that was an instant draw, and people of all ages and genders came and looked me over the shoulder, or and see what I was doing and asking questions and Africans. I mean, of course, Malawians, but I think it's the same in a lot of African cultures. When white people come, they take out their camera and they want to shoot pictures, and it's not regarded as very polite, and we were actually sometimes attacked for it, and I became very sensitive because we also don't want to be photographed by other people, right? I mean, our school has a strict policy not to photograph children and put them on Facebook, or so anyway, but we don't, for some reason, don't think these same things apply in Africa. So anyway, but drawing and painting, and even painting them as people, that made them more comfortable. I mean, actually it became what it was supposed to become. It became this way of communicating and integrating into the community. Of course, I started out with very, very small drawings and paintings. As I said, I was not a watercolorist, and I had to I never thought I would become one. But I mean, after you paint every day, and you sit there, I mean, you just have no choice to become, much better than when you started out. One of my students one day took me into the village of her grandmother, and I was painting. They were talking and chatting and having all this fun time, and I didn't really understand. That was another language, that was Chitonga, and I thought, okay, well, what am I going to do? I can look stupid, or I can just sit here with my paints out and I can just draw the kitchen, which I did. So I sat there, painting the kitchen. So one of the sons came, sat right next to me, and I gave him a piece of paper. And the grandmother, she was so fascinated that she would stand in the way of the sun and me, shading me for the entire time I was painting, so which was probably 2.5 hours. And it was summer, so it gets really, really hot. So people were, that supportive of, not taking pictures with a camera, but rather drawing and spending that time.
What is the kitchen like over there?
Yeah, that's a good question. Of course, when you go to big cities, some of the houses have kitchens like ours, that's all possible. But in the villages where I was, the kitchen is outside. So it's either under the scaré or it's in a small hut that has a roof, either metal roof or like a straw roof, and they build a fire in that hut, and it gets really smoky. I mean, it does have windows, and so the smoke has a way of escaping, but it's not very well designed. So I mean, we were not used to it, so some of us brought like swim goggles so our eyes wouldn't water. Or, they also, in Malawi, they also have bad accidents. Not constantly, but they happen, when kids fall into the fire or they have like lung problems, with the smoke. But yeah, so you build a fire. The traditional way is a 3-stone fire where you put 3 stones together like a star-like, and you put the firewood, like you just kind of push it between the rocks, and you put the pot on top of it. And it uses a lot of firewood. There's alternatives now but they're not movable, right? So you can build kind of a stove out of bricks, put it inside that hut, and it uses less firewood, also produces less smoke. But the advantage of the 3-stone fire is really that if you're cooking for one family of 5 people, right, you maybe need 1 or 2 of those fires. Well, one day your whole entire family comes, all the relatives, and you need maybe 5 fires, and it's just easy to build. I mean, you just like in your backyard, you're building like 4 more fires, and you cook the entire meal, and by the end of the day, the dishes are done and the stoves are disassembled.
Sounds like it was a life-changing experience. I'd like to go back a little bit and talk about your art and how you got involved with art at a younger age. I know you have a degree in art.
Yeah, so I grew up in East Germany, and I didn't start out as an artist. I wish I had this story like many artists. Yes, I always drew from the beginning of my time. That was my brother. So I have a nursing degree and psychology degree, and I didn't really think that normal people could study art because the selection process in Germany is very rigorous, and I didn't even know how to start. I didn't know that was an option. But when I was 19, after the wall came down, I studied in Las Vegas at UNLV for a year, and I found out that I could just enroll in art classes. I remember calling them and said, well, what do I have to do to get into this art program? And they were like, okay, well, you sign up and you pay your fee.
Quite different.
Yes.
Germany.
And that is how I, dropped all my psychology classes and started living in this studio of UNLV. This is how I became engaged in art. So I was like, maybe 20 when I first started and didn't stop. I would stop occasionally when I moved back to Germany and kind of finished my master's degree and had children, but I would restart it again when I would come back to the United States. And I actually lived in Zion National Park for a while, raising my children, and since there is no daycare, in contrast to Germany, so what a shocker. We had to create our own daycare. So a friend of mine started a preschool and asked me if I would help. And we would have a place for our kids to go, and we wouldn't work for money, but we would work for time off. And that is when I started going to art school at former Dixie College, and would take classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then I was hooked even more, and I moved to Cedar City to complete my art degree. Yes, and it was my goal to become a very famous big muralist or something, which is interesting because now I'm painting more in smaller formats. But
So
you didn't, I didn't answer the question about, how is life like. So maybe you want to know more about that. I kind of keep getting sidetracked, I think.
No, you're doing great. But
Okay.
Sidetracked is good.
Okay.
so tell us what life was like in Africa.
That is really a very long story. So I see if I probably can talk for hours about this. Of course, we usually start with the differences, but everything is different. And I think what is most, puzzling to us coming from a Western world, that there's really no time as we know it. I think I mentioned that already.
You did, and I find that very interesting.
So, for example, as Peace Corps, they gave us like clear assignments with deadlines, and we had to meet with the community, and at certain times, and you have to kind of like set up meetings, and that was the most amazing thing, because I would set up a meeting at 2:00, and I would sit there, and people would start showing up like at 4. And the last people would show up at 6, and that was just the way they did everything, and so you couldn't really plan anything. So we had to kind of throw this whole thinking out of the window. So once I got it, I understood that is just one other way of doing things, because they also got a lot of stuff done. So if I can maybe have like one example, our school organized a field trip for our students, and there's a lot involved. Of course, you have to like order the bus from the district, and the fuel, and there has to be a driver, and of course food, but there is no fast food, right? So we took like a sack of rice and a sack of beans and a carton of eggs and these kind of things, and stones and the pots that we would just cook. But on that Monday morning we showed up for the field trip, and it was extensive. You had to bring extra clothes and things, and well, the bus was double booked and it was not available. So, anybody kind of went back to work and, to school. I, of course, had to kind of arrange that with Peace Corps, and they were like 10 hours away, and, with bad connection, so that was difficult. Anyway, so life just went on. Nobody knew if we would do this field trip or not. Well, maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, I would come to school, and the kids would come to school, and there was a bus. And I thought, yes, we're going to go to this field trip today. And everybody needs to go home and pack your clothes and come back running, and we are going today. And everybody was just not missing a beat. They all went home, packed a few clothes, hopped on this bus, including myself. We just stopped at a couple of markets, got the beans and the rice and the, tomatoes and the pots and everything. And we were double stacked in the bus, and off we went on a 3-day trip.
Was that exciting?
That was very exciting. So it was exciting for the students who lived in an area that was wooded and had still a lot of green and a lot of water through the lake. And we drove down south to a national park and to other areas. And an hour south, where they would never get, by their own means, you could see that deforestation was like a big problem. So since everything was cooked on a wood stove, and everything was built with wood. I mean, the sheds, the houses were built with bricks, but the bricks were fired with wood. So wood is an essential natural resource, and the kids had no idea that Malawi was actually mostly deforested already. So in their own culture, that was kind of just a jump for us, who we could use buses and airplanes. For them, it was the experience of a lifetime to see that.
I can imagine the kids getting on the bus. There must have been a lot of chatting with anticipation and excitement, and I can hear it now.
Yes, absolutely, and they're not different than any other kids in the whole other world, right? I mean, they're just as excited and just as nice and just as naughty as anywhere else. The only difference with naughtiness is, culturally, there's a lot of respect for elder people, and there's, a hierarchy. So when you're young, you get told what to do and you better follow that. And when you're older, you can tell other people what to do. So kind of creating or maintaining good behavior or relatively good behavior was actually a lot easier there than it is here. And I speak out of experience because I'm a teacher. So that's a difference too. So time, deadlines, respect. What else is different? Yeah, I mean,
Water?
Water.
Availability of water?
I was actually, so water was my Achilles heel, which is probably the same for everybody living in these countries, because, I mean, I didn't have running water. In my first house I did, in my second house I didn't. My closest water source was at the school, which was about 1 kilometer away. And I had to carry it. I mean, I had to carry it on my head or on my bike somehow, or I found out too late that since I'm already older, I could have told everybody younger than me to get me water, which I used later as a disciplinary tool. So I would bring 3 buckets to school, put them in the front of the classroom and say, okay, if your name shows up on this board 3 times, you bring me a bucket of water.
I love that. That's a great.
And they didn't think I would, I would do this because, so disciplinary actions are a lot harsher than they are here, although they didn't have they wouldn't beat the kids anymore 90% of the time, I would say. I mean, it did happen, But there were other things. I mean, they had to kind of dig holes or, cut trees or, or clean the principal's house or something like this, So yes, water. Rainy season was great because I could put all my buckets underneath my metal roof and the water would just run off. And I would just leave it outside with a lid. And when the time I would get home, I had like really warm water to bathe in or to do laundry. Other than that, every bucket I had to carry. And once you have to do that for a long time, you realize what kind of stress that is, because I mean it's really fun to do it for 2 weeks, maybe even for a few months, because you know how strong you are and it's kind of a routine. But I got sick there several times, and sometimes so sick that I couldn't even get up. And where would the water come from? If you wouldn't have a network of neighbors or friends or people checking in on you, you wouldn't have any water. And I mean, it always weighed on me. Wherever I went, I would always think, do I have enough water? I knew exactly how much water I needed. If I needed to do laundry, I needed 3 buckets. And then I had a certain, method to not overuse the water, right? Certain water could not be used for cooking. And I was always worried that I would be sick with water, so I had to boil it. Peace Corps gave us a water filter, but it was a complicated procedure. In the end, I lived close to an NGO, I mean about 20 minutes by bicycle. And they had a well. For whatever reason, I could drink that water there, even without boiling. And I don't know if they have an extra filter, because they had volunteers from all over the world, and they tried to make sure that nobody got sick. So I would just go and get small amounts of water, like in gallon containers or something, for me to just drink like this. But everything else, I was completely dehydrated all the time. Then when I returned to the Western world, it really had left some marks on my body to be constantly dehydrated. So I also didn't have electricity, which I got used to a lot better than not to have running water.
What was the typical food like for you?
So since Peace Corps paid us by local standards, so I mean, when you calculate that into dollars, it's a ridiculous amount. It was like $120 a month, and but you could live off of that money if you didn't buy alcohol. Alcohol was really expensive, or if you wouldn't go into any stores where tourists would go. So they had like every big city, so they had like 3 big cities in the whole country, but every big city had like a big grocery store, like maybe Smith, and like in the capital they had like one big store like Walmart maybe, so you could buy things. But with our salary, we could not buy anything there. So we went to local markets, and that is where that really changed for me, I think, because you don't buy any frozen food, you don't buy any food that's imported from South Africa. Buying an apple wasn't expensive. I mean, you would buy 1 apple at a time at a specific market. So in our local market, we had small fish. They were called usipa, and they were really, in the beginning, disgusting to me, but it was a source of protein, In the beginning, I didn't eat it, but they always had tomato, and they always had some kind of greens, usually some leaves from pumpkins or, from beans. They did have peanuts. It's a peanut growing country. There was always rice. You could always buy rice and beans. And bananas, there were always bananas, and the fruit of the season, right? Whatever came off the trees, mangoes sometimes. So mango season was really an amazing season because, all the food storage was almost depleted, and nothing else was growing. So there was still a month for the harvest to come, and so everybody just loved, the mango season. So I often lived off, rice and tomatoes. There was some, a form of white bread that you could buy, but I couldn't cook my own beans because, on the wood fire, it would take like 4 hours. And after my work, I didn't have, to be honest, I didn't have 4 hours to cook beans. So I would go to the neighbors or, cassava root was one of the things. And so there was like no snacking, right? So every time you eat something, it was an extensive process to actually cook. So, oftentimes I would come home, from, a long day. You teaching and then work in the community and come home and I'm like, okay, well, I am hungry, but I'm not gonna start the fire and start the food and all of this. I think I'm gonna eat tomorrow at the school. And so it was like interesting, an interesting relationship to food, because in a way you had what you needed, but it looked completely different than what we think here or what we need. So for example, I went there as a vegetarian, and I realized really quickly that people actually do need protein, and it's ridiculous to buy protein bars because you can only get them in the capital, and they're really, really expensive, And so you would just kind of eat a little bit of meat, but the locals would have, I was introduced, and if I want to eat chicken, well, there is one, go catch it. And you start, you start catching the chicken and then plucking the chicken. And
Really?
So, it's a lengthy process, and to know that Christmas dinner was a chicken made absolutely sense to me because it just took so long. It was a special, special deal. I know now what it means not to have protein and how it feels in the body. It kind of creates this, I called it protein hunger, because you can eat, but you don't get full. So you have to find some kind of meat or something. But on the other hand, I also realized you don't need as much protein as we think we need here to actually just kind of cover your nutritional basis. So that was a complete change, and some of it has remained still to this day, that I prefer like very, very simple foods. I can just boil a sweet potato in the morning and just eat it like this. Just slice it up and eat the sweet potato. So no butter on it, no spices on it, no. I also like just simple rice. Nothing on it, nothing with it, nothing, just simple rice. So as I said, some of the things have remained, and I still feel like that my system gets overwhelmed when I have like too many ingredients in one food.
Did you lose weight?
When I was there, yes. Yes, I did lose weight.
Can I ask about holidays there? Were there holidays, and did that bring some excitement to the village? And
Oh yeah, I mean, yes. In a way, so the excitement, I'm glad you asked for that, because the excitement is every day, really, because people create their own holidays even if there's no holiday. I mean, when they go and work in the fields, they sing. When they get together, I mean, even the young kids, they sing and they dance. When we walked to the beach in the heat with the water on our heads and some mandazi in the bag, the girls, I mean, it was a 40-minute walk to the beach, and they would sing and dance the whole entire time. So you would just go into a village on Sunday and people would practice for whatever, I don't know, and people were just singing and dancing. I miss that. You know, it's like, it's everywhere. They do have holidays, like some, you know, Independence Day, for example, and things like that. Also, you know, Christmas or Christmas time, you know, it's not exactly Christmas, because Christmas is in the rainy season, and in the rainy season you have to work in the field. So it's a time you have a family meal with chicken, and then you go off and work. So it's not like here, but there's always celebratory like feel in the air. So some of it comes from churches. 80% of Malawians are some form of Christian. 20% are Muslim, and so people dance and sing in the churches because the churches are different than here, right? I mean, if you're lucky, you have a building, but most of the time it's outside or it's in school or, you know, in other buildings that are provided. So every Sunday can be a celebration, and, you know, people sing and everybody preaches. And I mean, the voices that are there, because they're trained every day, pretty much, you know, singing and dancing. It's just part of life. Weddings, they even sing and dance at funerals. You know, funerals are like big occasions, and everybody takes time off for funerals. So there's occasion, if there's a death in the village, it was possible that no teacher showed up ever to teach, because, you know, that has priority. You know, your family has priority. These kind of communal events have priority. And, you know, as I mentioned before with the water, it is important to keep these relationships with your immediate community alive and well, because there's always times when you need them, you know.
Sounds like they were happy people, even though they had a hard life. Am I getting the right feel?
Yes. Yes. I actually recently just listened to a podcast, and they were exploring, you know, what happiness means, or what are the conditions for happiness. Is it materialism, or is it, you know, can poor people be happy? And, you know, and of course it's not a very simple answer, but if I remember right, it's if you're poor in a poor country and you have some form of faith, then you can always be happy, you know. And that is what I experienced there. You know, people were always singing, dancing.
Yeah, without an event, without a group, you got to sing. They just sang.
Yes, but they also had groups. So, I'm glad you're asking about groups, because that is something that is different to our life here. The culture is really organized, or organizes itself in groups. So the village has a youth group. I mean, it's not that the government or the state would come in and say, okay, we create this group. I mean, it kind of comes out of itself. The students, they create their own group. The farmers have a group, and they have a lead farmer, and they share experiences with their crops, and and the person who has most experience, they give like little workshops, or they have a women's group, or they have a financial, like a savings group. You know, they would go, and it's kind of like a miniature banking system where everybody kind of pays in like small amounts, and if a hardship comes to a family, you know, they can kind of borrow against that money. Or they have like healthcare groups, mother groups. So, for example, the parent groups like PTO or PTA here, in one of the schools, the parent group or the mothers group, really, they would come in twice a week and they would cook a meal. I mean, just really kind of just a porridge, a huge pot of porridge for the students who wanted to stay longer for a study time. So school usually ended at 2:00 and everybody was hungry, right? I mean, they would kind of get up really early at 4:00, do chores, walk to the school, and And 2:00 came and they were really hungry. I mean, they had to go home. I mean, you could do nothing extra curricular without food. And so in that one school, the mothers group would come in twice a week and cook. Though they saved the money, they fundraised, and they provided that food. Yeah. So and then these groups, and then you have church groups and choir groups and groups that kind of just come together. So once a year, they rehearse like a performance kind of thing for New Year's, and so they have like a New Year's singing competition. From the different villages, and so that particular group doesn't stay a year round. That is like a 3 months or 4 months group. They also had an English literature club, so they would get together and they read like English books, and so I mean all kinds of groups. Life is organized like this.
Do you ever hear from any of your former students?
Yes and no. Of course, with Facebook and WhatsApp, I mean it's easier than ever to stay in touch. Of course, our cultural differences are so large, and Africans, of course, are Malawians in the village, right? I mean, there's Malawians that travel, or they have some of them have jobs like with Peace Corps, for example, they occasionally can travel, but most Malawians cannot really travel. They don't really understand how other cultures work, So unfortunately, as white people, we are often like judged as, okay, you're white, you have lots of money, and unfortunately, that's kind of like how friendships work, right? I read a book just before I went there, and it's called Africans and Money. And it's part of the culture to, when you are an affluent member of their family or community, you spread out your wealth. So it's expected that you care for the rest of your family, and that was expected from all of us too, in a way, and it's very difficult because the whole country wants something from you, and it's a very difficult thing to navigate because you have emotional connections, but you're also expected to provide. And while you're there, or while I was there, you have those personal connections, and you're invited into the family, and you cook together, and you chat together, and you cry together, and all of these things, right? So if you're apart, on different continents, and you're on Facebook, you see each other and you say hi occasionally, but in a way, there's always this need, right? I mean, we need money for our children's education, or we just had a bad flood and we need money to rebuild, and of course you cannot really unfortunately sustain friendships like this for a very long time, right? So we try to stay in touch, but I mean the cultural differences and the not knowing what the other's life is, really prevents friendships in a way that maybe we understand them.
Yeah, that's kind of sad, but it's interesting to understand it now. Is there a person who made the biggest impact on your life?
There's probably several. I must say one of the person I most respected was the vice principal of my second school, and he was such a wonderful stand-up person, concerned for his students, involved in students' life and the well-being of people, that, I mean, I'm occasionally staying in touch with him, and it's a real loss for me that he cannot be in my life, you know. I also had a really good friend. She was the wife of one of the teachers I worked with, and she spoke English. And of course, you know, that was like important to me since I didn't speak the language so well. And she was the most warm-hearted, you know, person, always welcoming. She also understood that even white people have needs, right? And we get lonely and we get sad, and they would always pick up on it. And they would, I mean, this particular woman, I had another woman friend, and this one time I just had gotten some upsetting news, and they could just tell. They picked up on that, and I said, okay, well, I'm just gonna go home, and you know, her and her husband, I mean, you cannot go home. I mean, in Malawi, when you're sad, you cannot be alone. And I said, well, I just want to be alone. I said, no, you cannot be alone. So that's the time when they showed me how to actually catch and cook a chicken. And after the 5 hours, right, I mean, I really felt better. But then it wasn't done by, you know, with that. It was, after that, it was, okay, husband said, I will relieve my wife from all her household duties for the night, because in Malawi, when you're sad, you cannot sleep alone. So he walked us home, and his wife stayed with me the night.
That's a really interesting story.
Yes, it
A
is.
different culture.
I find it interesting that my question was, is there one person who made an impact on your life? We don't have to put this in, but the two people you referenced were from your time in Africa.
Oh.
So it's like your time in Africa has been a really, really important part of your life, albeit a small part.
You know, it's really interesting. When I really think about it, I can probably think of, you know, many people who made an impact on my life. But yes, so I always said that Europe gave me intellect, America gave me creativity, and Africa opened my heart and gave me love.
Wow.
I love that.
And this is a direct quote from me, by me. and this is how I still feel. I mean, it was this major impact on my life. Because maybe it's because we didn't speak the same language, you know? Maybe we experienced how humans can connect on a completely different level, you know, across completely different cultures. The fact that we would help each other, you know, despite our many differences. I mean, and the spontaneity of African people. I mean, as I said, you know, dance and, you know, song and, you know, hardship and tears and laughter were all so close together, you know. And yeah, so that is true. That is how I feel.
What do you hope that the audience will gain from, or understand better, or feel from looking at your art?
I really hope that it gives them a window in this world that I experienced. I really hope that maybe some people look at these images and think, oh, I thought Africa was dusty. I thought Africa was ripped clothes and dirty and poor and sad. And my paintings show the opposite, I think. And I really hope that this spark, you know, jumps across to the viewer, and people will, you know, get this impression. We are humans, and nothing really divides us except language, you know. And, you know, we all have a heart, we all have a brain, we all have skin, we all can touch each other, we can comb each other's hair, we can cook for each other, we help each other carry the water. And, you know, we are one world, and we are all connected.
What has inspired you this week?
What has inspired me this week, you will not believe this, but my week was kind of boring, and two things have inspired me. One was my hike into the mountains, And
The one I went on or a different one?
no,
A different one.
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
good.
yes. And the other one was the idea of being able to talk about Africa with you guys.
Oh, really?
Yes.
We loved it. We absolutely loved it. I feel like I've learned so much. And not just learned facts, but felt Africa.
Yeah, I was going to
Today.
say, I felt in my heart
Yeah.
here that there is a difference. We tend to, we go home and we get behind our walls and our air conditioners,
Yeah.
and then we don't talk to each other. And if we didn't have that, we might be out singing it.
That is the one thing I miss most. And when I returned from Africa, I kind of got stuck in Germany because of COVID.
Ooh.
And I thought that Germany and Africa are the exact opposites of cultures. And I was really literally sick in my soul because of those things you just said. Right? I just came from this vibrant, singing, open, extroverted culture, very warm, to a cold place, where I could sit outside of my little apartment and nobody would stop by. No children, no elderly, nobody would say hi. The clothes are dark, right? And as you said, yes, I mean, we tend to kind of be behind our walls because we have so much in our houses that keeps us entertained. And in Malawi, the life happens outside. You go inside only to sleep. And so everything is, for the better or the worse, for everybody to see, for everybody to participate in.
Birgit, we want to thank you for spending time with us today. This was so fascinating and heartwarming.
Yes, it was. Thank you very much.
And thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk about this time, a very influential time in my life. And thank you, whoever listens to this. It is my pleasure to share those experiences and hopefully inspire some of you to go and visit Africa.
And volunteer.
And volunteer.
Yes. Thanks, Birgit.
Oh, thank you.
Broadcasting from the Mesquite Works Steam Center in the scenic Mojave Desert, the Artbox sponsors thank you for listening. You can find us on Spotify, Samsung, iHeartRadio, Podchaser, and Amazon Music. Please subscribe so you don't miss an episode. We are on Facebook and Instagram as The Artbox. We welcome all comments. You can email us at artboxvv@gmail.com. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of its hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect those of our sponsors.
But I see the way you